All right, so you've got that big neuroanatomy exam coming up, right? It can feel like a whole mountain of information, but don't sweat it. In this explainer, we're going to cut right through the complexity and give you a survival guide to the absolute must-know concepts that are going to help you ace that test.
Okay, so here's our game plan for today. We're going to kick things off with a foundational debate that basically started modern neuroscience. Then we'll map out the entire nervous system's blueprint. From there, we'll explore the brain's incredible protective fortress and its different layers, and we'll wrap up by diving into the vital fluids that keep the whole thing running. Let's get into it.
First up, let's travel back in time. We need to start at the very beginning, with a huge debate that completely shaped how we think about the nervous system.
So this was the central mystery at the end of the 19th century. You had these two incredible scientists, Camilo Golgi and Santiago Ramon y Cajal. They were both using the exact same, brand new silver staining technique to look inside the brain's wiring. But they came to totally different conclusions about what they were seeing.
Here's the deal. Golgi, on one side, pushed his reticular theory. He was convinced that all the neurons were physically melted together into one giant, continuous spiderweb. But Cajal? He looked at the same images and proposed something totally different, the neural doctrine. He argued that neurons were actually individual, separate cells that just got really close to each other, communicating across tiny gaps. And here's the absolute key takeaway for your exam. Cajal was right. His idea was proven correct, and that tiny gap he imagined, what we now call the synapse, is the foundation of pretty much all of modern neuroscience.
Okay, so now that we've established that the brain is made of individual neurons, let's zoom out and look at how this entire system is organized, from the big picture down to its essential cells.
So, at the highest level, the nervous system is split into two major parts. First, you've got the central nervous system, or CNS. That's your command center, the brain and the spinal cord. It's where all the decisions are made. Then you have the peripheral nervous system, or PNS. Think of this as the vast network of cables, all the spinal and cranial nerves that connect the command center to every single part of your body, sending and receiving messages.
And listen, it's not all about the neurons. For your exam, you absolutely have to know about the brain's unsung heroes, the glial cells. You've got oligodendrocytes, which wrap around neurons to create insulation called myelin. You've got astrocytes, which provide structural support and nutrients. And then there are the microglia. They're basically the brain's dedicated immune system. You can even think of them as the police of the brain, cleaning up debris and fighting off invaders.
Now, to really study the brain, we need to be able to look at it from different angles, and we do that by slicing it in specific ways. The first and probably most common view you'll encounter is the coronal plane. Just imagine someone is facing you, and you take a slice from ear to ear. That front and back view, which shows you the structures inside, is the coronal plane.
Next up is the sagittal plane. This one's super straightforward. It slices right down the middle, splitting the brain into its left and right halves. This gives you that classic side view profile of the brain, perfect for seeing the structures that run along the midline.
And finally, we have the horizontal plane, which is also called the axial plane. This one slices the brain from top to bottom, kind of like taking a layer off a cake. It gives you a bird's eye view looking down into its structures. Seriously, getting these three planes, coronal, sagittal, and horizontal, down pat is a total game changer for orienting yourself in any brain scan or diagram you'll see on your test. Okay, let's talk about the armor. The brain's first and most obvious line of defense is, of course, the hard, bony skull that wraps around it. It's truly a cranial fortress.
You know, the inside of the skull isn't just a smooth bowl. It's actually got these three big depressions, or fossae, that act like custom-molded seats for the different parts of the brain. You have the anterior fossa up front for the frontal lobes, the middle fossa for the temporal lobes, and the posterior fossa in the back cradling the cerebellum and occipital lobes. It keeps everything perfectly snug and secure.
Now, any good fortress needs doorways and windows, right? Well, in the skull, these are called foramina. As the slide says, these are the super important holes that allow all the vital nerves and blood vessels to get in and out of the brain.
Okay, so for your exam, you don't need to memorize every single hole, but there are a few heavy hitters you have to know. You've got the foramen ovale and spinosum for parts of the trigeminal nerve, the lamina cribrosa, which is where the olfactory nerve for your sense of smell passes through, and then there's the big one, the foramen magnum, that massive hole at the very bottom where the brainstem connects to the spinal cord. So just underneath that super hard skull, the brain has another 3 layers of protection. These are flexible, tough wrappings called the meninges.
And this slide lays out their order perfectly, from the outside in. First you hit the dura mater. Its name literally means tough mother, and yeah, it's the thickest, most durable outer layer. Beneath that is the arachnoid mater, which gets its name from its spider web-like appearance. And finally, right up against the brain is the pia mater, or tender mother. It's a super delicate membrane that hugs every curve and fold of the brain's surface. A great way to remember it is like putting on a glove. 3 perfect layers of protection.
Now, tucked between that web-like arachnoid layer and the delicate pia is this really critical gap called the subarachnoid space. And this space isn't empty. It's filled with these little web-like fibers and, most importantly, cerebral spinal fluid, or CSF. This fluid-filled space is amazing. It acts like a hydraulic cushion, and it's the main channel for CSF to flow all around the brain.
And that brings us to our final but definitely not least section, the internal life support systems. Let's take a look at how the brain actually gets fed and cleaned inside its cranial fortress.
First things first, energy. The brain is an absolute energy hog. Get this. Even though it only makes up about 2% of your body's weight, it demands a whopping 20% of all the oxygenated blood that your heart pumps out. That's incredible.
So, to manage this critical supply chain, the brain has this genius piece of engineering at its base called the Circle of Willis. It's basically an arterial roundabout where the major arteries all connect. And why is this so important? The key word here is redundancy. It's like a highway ring road around a city. If there's a major accident and one road gets blocked, traffic can just get rerouted through the circle. It's a brilliant backup system to prevent a catastrophic failure in blood flow, which would otherwise cause a stroke. Now, besides blood, the brain is literally swimming in cerebral spinal fluid. This slide shows you its amazing journey. It's made in a special structure called the choroid plexus, and then it flows through these inner chambers called ventricles. From there, it makes its way into that subarachnoid space we just talked about. As it circulates, it delivers nutrients and provides buoyancy. In fact, and this is a fantastic fact, it makes the brain so buoyant that it reduces its effective weight by over 90%. Finally, it gets drained away through special structures into the sinuses.
So what's actually in this life-giving fluid? Well, here's the recipe. As you can see, it's about 99% water, but it's also a very carefully balanced electrolyte soup. It's got glucose for energy and essential salts like sodium and chloride, which are absolutely vital for neurons to be able to fire correctly.
Okay, so after the CSF has done its tour of duty circulating around and cleaning things up, it has to be drained away. This happens in what are called the dural venous sinuses. Now, don't confuse these with the sinuses in your nose. These are big, vein-like channels whose walls are actually made of that tough dura mater. For your exam, you'll want to remember these key players, the sagittal, transverse, and sigmoidal sinuses. They create a drainage pathway that funnels all that used fluid and blood into the jugular vein, which then carries it away from the head.
And this really brings it all home. Every single part of this intricate system, from the little holes in the skull to the meninges to the CSF drainage, is absolutely essential. If you get a simple blockage in that CSF drainage pathway, for example, the fluid can build up and cause a super dangerous condition called hydrocephalus. This is exactly why mastering neuroanatomy is so critical, because every single structure is directly tied to function, health, and, when things go wrong, disease.